Quorum.
There we go.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Berkeley County Board of Education meeting this Tuesday, February 12, 2019. I call this meeting to order. I declare a quorum is present and the media has been notified. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Made the motion.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Ramsey, a second by Ms. Conder to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion?
Madam Chairwoman, I would like to make an amendment. Madam Chairwoman, I move to amend the reasons for executive session to include the exigent circumstance of ongoing financial investigation and related legal matters, thereto that do not become known until today, and this board needs to be briefed by legal counsel prior to the next school board meeting. Although this item was not noticed, 2/3 of this board may approve its addition, and there will be no action taken on this item tonight.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Ramsey, an amendment by Mr. Ramsey, a second by Mr. McQuillan. Is there any discussion on the amendment? We will not be taking action tonight, and we were in court today, so we were going to get follow-up on that. All right, hearing no additional comments, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The amendment passes 4-0. So we'll be adding to executive session. I'm sorry, 5-0. Good Lord, 4 people are not here. We will be adding to executive session an legal update on the financial investigation. Legal briefing on the financial investigation. All right, so now we'll call the question on the approval of the agenda. There's no other discussion. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The agenda is approved 5-0. We'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting on January 29th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Mr. Ramsey. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. We'll now move on to agenda item 2A, executive session. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
I made the motion.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Ramsey, a second by Mr. McQuillan to adjourn into executive session. The stated purpose of executive session is the discussion of pending employment matters, 4 student attendance appeals, and legal counsel on the financial investigation. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are in executive session. I'll now entertain a motion to return to regular session.
Made the motion.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. Ramsey, a second by Mr. Barrow to return to regular session. I would like to note for the minutes that no action was taken in executive session. Is there any other comments? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We are now in regular session. Please now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 4A, citizen comments. No one registered prior to this time for citizen comments, so we'll move on to agenda item 5A, action from executive session. We'll hear student attendance appeals. I'll now entertain a motion. Our students 1 and 2 will be handled administratively. So now I'll entertain a motion for student number 3.
Madam Chair, in the matter of student number 3, I move that we grant the attendance appeal.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Mr. Ramsey, to grant the appeal of student number 3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
No.
The ayes have it. We'll now entertain a motion for student number 4.
Madam Chair, in the matter of student number 4, I move that we grant the attendance appeal.
Second. There's a motion by McQuillan, a second by Wofford, to grant the appeal of student number 4. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
No.
The ayes have it. There's no other action from executive session, so now we'll move on to agenda item 6A, the superintendent's report. Dr. Ingram.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, and members of the audience. This past Saturday, I spoke at the opening ceremony of the annual Storm the Citadel event. Marrington Middle and Cane Bay Middle had trebuchets entered in the middle school competition. Westview Middle had stick bridges on display. Got to talk with some kids, take some pictures, even tweeted. Cross High usually participates, and they're usually very competitive, but unfortunately Mr. Sweat had pneumonia this year and they had to cancel out. But they will be back in the fold next year, I'm sure. Congratulations to all the beta clubs at Berkeley High, Goose Creek High, and Stratford High schools. And all the clubs had a very strong showing at the State Beta Club Convention this past weekend. Berkeley High brought home 12 awards, Goose Creek 17, and Stratford 7. And we're all proud of their accomplishments. I also want to thank the students, teachers, and administrators who organized and supported the SCORE conference at Sangaree Middle School last Wednesday. Middle and high schools from all over the Lowcountry brought over 200 faculty, I guess that's a word, faculty, and students together for the event. Leadership and Renaissance students attended and led sessions during this exciting event. This week is School Bus Driver Appreciation Week. The entire month of February is also Love the Bus Month. We have coloring sheets posted on our website and are asking that each child color one for their driver. Please remember to thank a bus driver. Congratulations are in order for Mr. Dion Jackson and Ms. Kim Glaze. The South Carolina Association of Educational Office Professionals selected Mr. Jackson as Administrator of the Year and Ms. Glaze as the organization's Office Professional of the Year. They will be formally recognized during the organization's annual conference in Myrtle Beach at the end of the month. Congratulations. Years, Dion, and I've never had a standing ovation. I'm jealous. Okay. Yesterday morning, I had to cancel the cabinet meeting because several of our cabinet members had issues that needed immediate attention. Last night, Chairwoman Wofford and Secretary Ramsey and I attended the Rally for Reform with our teachers at the Lightsey Chapel on the campus of CSU. We were grateful once we got past a little film clip that teachers did get a chance to speak. Wish more people could have, but I do appreciate the attendance. Mr. Nick Snyder did a great job speaking at the event, and we are working hard with the legislature to make sure that teachers get the compensation that they deserve. This coming Friday, schools will be closed for the Teacher Forum Staff Development Conference to be held at Cane Bay High and Cane Bay Middle Schools. I will be making a presentation entitled Value-Driven Organizations. During this time, I'll be highlighting the board's shared values, concept statements, and goals and commitments, and the design team will be working on retooling our vision and mission. And I'll have a PowerPoint for that, and I'll certainly share it with the board at the appropriate time. This week, yesterday, we had a grease fire in the cafeteria kitchen at Goose Creek High. The cafeteria manager reacted very quickly. Students were evacuated briefly, thanks to the child nutrition staff and Hal Hall Ames for providing bagged lunches on Monday. The cafeteria will be up and running full scale tomorrow, except for French fries. We also evacuated, I don't eat French fries, but No, the kids love them. We evacuated Berkeley High for a little while this morning due to a smoking AC unit. Fire department quickly cleared the building and students were able to resume their normal schedule. And we will, I think the part's on order, Dion, I think. So it should be in and we'll get that straight. So there weren't flames or anything, just mainly a lot of smoke. This coming Monday, February 18th, our schools and offices will be closed in observance of President's Day. And I am providing each of you, board members, and for the members of the audience, I encourage each of you to read. I give you a written copy of House Bill 3759, all 84 pages of it. I've read it cover to cover. I've got to go back and study it some more. This is a comprehensive education reform bill introduced by Speaker Jay Lucas. There is language in there that is the formation of another committee, statewide committee with an education czar. I'm not too comfortable with that term, education czar, and I think we've got enough committees at the state level. But, give me your feedback. I've gotten feedback from Secretary Ramsey on it, and certainly I will be working with members of the legislature about that. Of course, it's just a House bill, hasn't gone to the Senate yet, and I'm sure it will come out very differently than it goes in, as it usually does with these types of things. I'm going to be giving you comments from the public meetings at Sangaree and Devon Forest after Dr. Parker's presentation. I have not read them myself because I just got them late in the day today, but we did get and record, as promised, feedback for you from community members over proposed lines, district changes, and we think it's important that each of you have a chance to read that. I don't want to give it to you before the presentation because I don't want you to be reading it during the presentation, so I'll give those out to you. And thanks, of course, to Emily for being here, and also if from Nexton Elementary, Susan Nelson, from our teacher forum, Susan, thank you for coming, as well as Courtney Johnson from Sedgefield Middle. Courtney, thank you very much. And I will apologize. I'm supposed to be wearing a red tie tonight, but when I got your email, Emily, I was already at the office. So in support of teachers and reform and issues with pay. So Madam Chairwoman, that concludes my report for this evening, and thank you very much for your indulgence.
Thank you, Dr. Ingram. Agenda item 7A, temporary committee assignments. We have quorum on all committees tonight, so no assignments are necessary. Agenda item 8A, adjournment of the full board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion by Mr. McQuillan, a second by Mr. Ramsey to adjourn the full board meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The full meeting is adjourned for the Academics and Innovation Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am calling the Committee on Academics and Innovation to order. I declare there is a quorum of committee members present, and note that the media has been given proper notice pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act. The first agenda item is the Head Start Budget Expenditures Report for December 2018 and the Head Start Credit Card Report for December 2018. What is the pleasure of the committee?
Madam Chair Lady, I make a motion to approve the Head Start Budget Expenditures Report for December 2018 and the Head Start Credit Card Report for December 2018.
And I second that motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Second agenda item is Career and Technical Education Textbook Adoption. Second reading, Dr. Kevin O'Gorman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Ingram, ladies and gentlemen. Bringing back to you a second reading for CTE textbook adoption. This is actually a rollover from prior to our break, so this is a little late coming back to you, but I've not heard any questions or concerns about these textbooks, so I submit to you our Career and Technology Education textbooks for second reading.
Thank you, Dr. O'Gorman. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair Lady, I make a motion to adopt the Career and Technical Education textbook as submitted by administration for second reading.
Thank you, and I will second that. Dr. O'Gorman, I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion carries. The third agenda item is the 2017-2018 federal, state, and local accountability. Dr. O'Gorman, you are again recognized.
Thank you, and I'd like to go ahead and invite Ms. Dana Cousins to come up, our Director of Testing and Accountability. She's going to go over some of the GUI metrics of this accountability model with you. Before she starts talking, I want to give you just a quick analogy to kind of have in the back of your head as we go through the measures behind this report card. So if I told everybody in this room that I was going to give you a test on these states. So I'm going to give you a map of the United States, and you all have to name the states, everywhere from South Carolina to Alaska to Hawaii, and you have to spell them all correctly. Dion's already got his phone out, and he's looking. Look at him, see? But the good news is that I'm going to grade all of your papers on a bell curve, and I'm telling you that before I even give you the test. So you're all going to take the test. You have to name the states. You have to spell them right. You're going to give them back to me, and I'm going to grade them on a bell curve. Now, the bell curve might have gotten some of us through high school, but this is a different kind of bell curve. I'm going to call it an upside-down bell curve. Because before I even give you the test, I'm going to tell you that 10% are going to get Fs, 10% are going to get As, 20% are going to get Ds, 20% are going to get Bs, and the rest of you will get Cs. Even if everyone in this room gets 90% of that test correct, 10% will still get Fs, 10% will still get As. So you might have a very small difference between your Fs and your As. If everyone gets 90 and above, everyone that scored 90 is going to get an F. You with me? Everyone that gets 99 and 100 gets an A. That is our whole accountability system in a nutshell. So as Ms. Cousins goes through this presentation, just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And how it
Also,
impacts
don't
us.
take our passion personally. We are very passionate about testing and matrix, and we may interrupt you for questions, but this is something we're really passionate about. So it's
Yes,
not
ma'am.
personal. But
I was
we
going to
might-
say, she's the the messenger.
Yeah,
Yes.
we'll be very kind.
And again, this is the state report card we're talking about,
State
correct?
and federal report card. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Yes, thank you. So my task tonight is to go over what the state report card looks like, what measures are in there, and they're called indicators. So, I've gone too far. So before we start talking about the actual components of the report card, it was built by combining the state and federal accountability systems. So in the past, we had two accountability systems. Now we have just one. So the reason that some of the metrics are as they are is based on state or federal law. So some changes based on state law is that our district does not receive an overall rating. Our schools receive ratings, but we have no district rating. Information is reported for the district, but not included in a rating. The ratings are based on a 100-point scale. Also, not only does each school have an overall rating, but each indicator has a rating. So lots of different excellent, good, average, below average, or unsatisfactory for schools overall and for each individual indicator. The report cards are published online. And there's also other data that has to be reported as required by state law, such as NAEP results. Some federal requirements is that the academic achievement indicator must only include ELA and math. So a big portion of our report cards, and you'll see in just a moment, is based on the ELA and math scores. English language proficiency for our English learners, a component is required in the report card. Also, we have to measure graduation rate. Academic progress was left to the state's discretion, and we do have a graphic to hopefully explain that. Also, we have to have an indicator for school quality or student success. And then additionally, each subgroup has to be included on the raters, on each indicator. So the performance ratings for schools are supposed to be based on the profile of the South Carolina graduate. If you read those components of the South Carolina graduate, you will see that our report cards are missing quite a few. So, as has been said, this was a good first effort, let's say, in the report card system. So all of our elementary, middle, and high schools that have been operational for at least 1 year will receive an overall rating. And then, as I mentioned before, each of the indicators, which are academic achievement, student progress, preparing for success, school quality, English learners proficiency progress, graduation rate, and college and career readiness, each of those have a rating also. And then other indicators or other data that's reported but not included in the calculation are the three that you see under that bullet. Just a note, the information that I'm going to share tonight does not include our primary schools report cards. Those are not available. They're not published publicly yet, so they're not included in this presentation. So here's a graphic of what percentage of our schools' rating is comprised of each indicator. So the blue section is academic achievement, and as is required by federal law, that is only ELA and math. Student progress is the dark burgundy. You can see that is a big portion of it as well, and that student progress metric only includes ELA and math scores as well. So a large portion of our schools' ratings are based on our ELA and math assessments. For schools that have 20 or more English learner students, they do have a certain percentage of their report card that's based on those students' progress towards proficiency. And then for elementary and middle schools, we also have a preparing for success indicator, which that's where our science and social studies assessments come in. And then the student or school quality, that was actually a survey that we administered to our students. Here's the graphic for the high school weightings. Again, the dark blue is academic achievement, which is based on ELA and math or English and Algebra 1 end of course exams. Graduation rate is the dark burgundy, and that's based on students successfully completing high school in 4 years. We have a college and career readiness indicator, which is the purple. And then again, we have preparing for success, which is science and social studies, and then the school quality indicator, which was the survey. And then additionally, you can see the English learners portion for those schools that have 20 or more EL students. So for our elementary, middle, and high schools, all of them, we have the academic achievement portion, which you saw. That takes up a large portion of our school's rating. For grades 3 through 8, that's based on the SC Ready ELA and math assessments. It also includes our students' results from the South Carolina alternate assessments, which in the past, when our schools were rated based on the old accountability model, our students' alternate assessment scores were just included in the district's report card, but now those scores are reported for individual schools. And then for high schools, you can see that was end of course in Algebra and English 1. Preparing for success, similarly, is our science and social studies, but you can see academic achievement, which is ELA and math, takes up a larger percentage than our preparing for success, which was science and social studies. Here's our results as a district compared to the state last year on SC Ready, ELA and math. You can see that in ELA, we outperformed the state. In math, we were close, just a little under. And then for the end of course graphics, the two columns in the middle, that's the percent of our students scoring a C or higher on those end of course assessments. And then the two columns on the right are those that were the percent passing. Just a comparison of our district to the state overall. For preparing for success, those are our science and social studies results, and you can see across the board in SC Pass Science and Social Studies and our end of course Biology 1 and U.S. History assessments, we outperformed the state as a whole. I'm going to skip to the right-hand side of this slide to talk about the English learners' proficiency progress. That's for schools that have 20 or more EL students, and that's how that indicator is calculated. And if you look to the left of the slide for school quality, this was a survey that was administered online to all of our students, and there were 3 levels of engagement: committed, compliant, and disengaged. And if you look at the 3 schools at the bottom, all 3 of those schools received 0 points for this particular indicator, but as you can see, their student results were much different. We have 3 totally different schools here, but yet they all received 0 points, which causes concern, because the school quality indicator was based on the percent of students who scored committed only, not compliant or disengaged. So on the left-hand side, you can see for Berkeley County School District, the percent that were committed in each of the categories based on that survey. That was what was rated for each of our individual schools, but what was not rated was a survey given to parents, students, and teachers that asked percent satisfied with each of those categories. Here you can see our English learners' progress compared to the state. Very, very close in there. For student progress, again, if you remember from the graphic for ELA or for elementary and middle schools, this takes up either 35 or 40 points. And it's not super easy to explain, but if we look at these ladders, we can see 2017 on the left and 2018 on the right. The yellow arrow indicates the growth standard, and that's actually the state's mean. And you can see from 2017 to 2018, our state's mean moved up. So if the state's average is 50 in 2017, you can see where it is on the ladder. In 2018, the mean is still 50, but it has moved up on the ladder. So it's almost like everyone's in a race to outbeat the state's growth. If you look at School A, even though their academic achievement, which you can see they were at the 30th, what's called NCE, and that's just the way that they determine those growth calculations. The school was at the 30th NCE in 2017, and they moved to the 40th NCE in 2018. But if you look at their their growth on the ladder, their steps on the ladder, you can see that their green arrow moved more than the state. So they're actually going to get more points, even though their achievement is below the state's average. They're going to get more points on the student progress or the student growth metric. If you look at School B, their academic achievement improved, but their actual NCE or their mean decreased. So they didn't move as much up the ladder as the state moved up the ladder. And then if you look at School C, their achievement stayed the same, but because their NCE dropped, then they're going to receive a negative growth because they didn't grow as quickly as the state grew. So it's a rabbit race.
It's not sustainable. It's very ridiculous and not sustainable.
It punishes
not
a school
accurate.
that historically has done well, whereas a school that may not have historically not done well, if they've shown that they've grown or they've improved, then they might all of a sudden become a Class A school.
They're going to get more points.
Excellent.
Right. They will get more points in this particular indicator because of their growth.
It's like long-term excellent achievement is not acknowledged in this model because you have to keep etching up the ladder faster than the state is.
I agree.
It's illogical.
I agree.
It makes absolutely no sense.
And that's a concern statewide.
That's illogical.
And I would say that our superintendent, Molly Spearman, is working on trying to improve this. And I will also say that the South Carolina School Board Association is working to improve this model. However, I will say, so far, we're getting some pushback from Columbia.
That's unfortunate.
Right. And I agree. So for high schools, we have our graduation rate, which is those students who graduate within 4 years. And then we also have a college and career readiness indicators. So to be college ready, you can see the criteria that our students would be deemed college ready or career ready. There are several avenues that they can either be college or career ready.
The thing that pushes my buttons here,
Yes, ma'am.
okay,
I knew it was coming. Just didn't know whose button was going to get pushed first.
is the amount of money that's involved in creating this measurement, the time that is spent. It takes a lot of money to do this, and as far as I'm concerned, it is a waste of the tax dollars or the taxpayers' dollars.
We could be investing these people's time in something much more valuable for kids.
Absolutely.
And I would encourage you to voice your opinion to Columbia.
I can't resist, Dan, you started. But one thing that I found that basically flabbergasted me when I came to this state is assuming that the test is this important, okay? And that's a big assumption, all right? In my past history, we got what we called item analysis, which I give a test and I get it back and I know what the kids got wrong. So as a teacher, I can work on those things, they can get better. We don't get item analysis, am I right, in South Carolina? And I know I'm right because I've been told that. And when I asked the question of someone who will remain unnamed but very knowledgeable at the state level, it was too expensive to provide item analysis. So we get a number back, but we have no idea what the kids got wrong. So how, in my feeble mind, can we use these instruments to improve instruction? So, Dana, we are not beating you up. You do a phenomenal job, and I know that Katie made me talk to you the day before the stuff came out. She made me because you know how little I put stock in these things. But nonetheless, you do an excellent job of reporting. I want everybody to know that. That Dana, she was a real godsend, and we're lucky to have her. But the model itself has lots of problems, and Mr. Ramsey's right. We are getting pushback from Columbia on some of this. But
and it doesn't take a genius if you invest the time to look exactly what we're trying to accomplish, that this test does not accomplish it. I mean, it just really is not hard to figure out. And it's not really, that's what's so frustrating, is it's not so hard to figure out a plan where we might actually could measure achievement from one year to the next. And we could actually help our kids do better. But when they bring this kind of stuff to us, where we can't have faith in it, and even the folks that brought it to us didn't even have faith that the numbers would be correct. And I actually have serious concerns that even the data that they took actually was not even accurate data. So just to look at it on every level, this is just not a good metric to measure our students' achievements.
Well, I have a very suspicious mind, okay? Very suspicious. You can manipulate numbers. Anybody can manipulate numbers to look like something you want the general public to see. Mm-hmm. And I feel that this is deceptive. I really do. I think it's deceiving, and I want to go on record as saying that. It's deceptive to the people in this state and to the people in our district.
And to understand that it came from the federal level. This was not something, as far as my understanding, necessarily that came from the state level. This was something that was decided at the federal level, that this is how we were going to measure our children and measure our achievement. And from my perspective, I will go on record that there is a clear agenda. And the agenda is not agenda that I feel is going to help our children.
No, I think it's going to damage them.
Just think it.
I've got a question about the English learners. I think I know what that means. These are students whose first language is not English.
That's
They're in
correct.
the English as a second language program.
That's correct.
So how is their progress or lack of progress measured?
They have an assessment called Access for L's, and they take their score from the first time that they took the test, and the goal is for the students to exit that program in 5 years. So they have a different goal each year for them to reach in order for them to consider being progressing towards proficiency.
So if the school has 1,200 students and 20 of those are English as a second language, how would that, let's say those students don't do very well, how would that, what weight? I see a pretty good sized piece of that pie. It looks like disproportionate to me in terms if you got 20 kids as ESL and 1,200 kids in the school, why would that be a big piece of that pie? So it would negatively affect the overall outcome of the testing. That's
I think you've pointed
That's
out
correct,
my suspicious
up to
mind.
10%.
Okay, my suspicious thinking.
Well, I'd like to know how many, you know good and well, we have a lot of ESL programs and kids in the program. I'd like to know if there are actually any schools that have fewer than 20 ESL kids in them.
Yes.
Okay, some of the smaller schools, rural schools, maybe
Yes.
JK.
I can't tell you 100% for sure, but I know that there are some.
Smaller schools would have fewer numbers, obviously, unless they're in an impacted area for transigent students that do not speak English as a first language. It just bothers me that such a small percentage of the students in a particular school would impact the negativity score so drastically.
I agree. I mean, there's so much wrong here that it's hard to even start, and not wrong with our performance, but the way it's been measured. There is I can guarantee you can drive down to Volvo, they are not testing every part on every car that's coming off that line. They just aren't doing it. Quality and accuracy, you're testing a %, you're doing a sample. There's no way Ms. Smith could sample every single financial transaction. That is not how it works. You take a sample, you learn from that sample, you change and you grow. It's just illogical. And last night, it was very good, but the State Chamber of Commerce president spoke, and he spoke about wanting measurements. And I don't disagree. I am a data person. I am an engineer. I appreciate data. But the kind of data that they're expecting on every single student is absolutely unreasonable, and no other industry tests like that. It's money. It's money for testing. It's billions of dollars, more money than the NFL. Just kind of makes me see red and makes me very frustrated, because the good things we're doing are distracted and the money is funneled into things that are not profitable.
And to Dr. Gorman's point, 10% of our kids are deemed failing before they ever
Exactly.
mark the first answer on a test.
Exactly.
There are some
That's
positive points here, though. It looks to me like
Yeah, we're
in the,
outperforming the state. We're doing a lot of good things.
We're doing very well in 3 through 8 pass. In science and social studies, we're outperforming the state in every level. In the EOCs and all of the U.S. history, biology, and U.S. history, we're outperforming the state by pretty significant margin. So I'd like to give a good shout out for our students, even and our faculty. Even though it's a flawed system, at least some of it is good news that we're outperforming the state in many ways.
Right.
On graduation rate, too.
Right. And I think that leads to the next slides. I've included those schools, all of our schools, and the ratings, their overall ratings that they received. So here you can see elementary. We didn't have any unsatisfactory school or schools that were rated unsatisfactory. 2 in the below average category, and then the rest excellent, good, and average. For middle schools, we did have 2 in the unsatisfactory category, and those have been identified as priority schools. And then for our high schools, you can see they all were above the unsatisfactory rating overall. But, and here are just links to the report cards and the accountability manual, if you have time after reading the packet that Dr. Ingram gave you. But yet there are lots of discrepancies that we saw in our report cards. Did you want to speak to these? Okay.
Just to give you a quick example, that bell curve was different for elementary, middle, and high, even though elementary, middle, and high are all on a 100-point scale. So you've got, for example, a high school with a 50 with a good rating and an elementary school with a 50 with a below average rating, for example, straight out of our data. You look at Goose Creek High School. Goose Creek High School had an average rating across the board, except for one category they were below average, and so their overall performance was below average, even though they were average in every area except for that particular one, which happened to be student engagement. I don't think that Ms. Cousins had an opportunity to say that student engagement survey, where they asked the students if the schools did not administer the survey, it didn't count at all in their report card. So schools across the state that had any kind of technical difficulties that didn't administer the survey, the number of schools that administered the survey shrunk, so the number of schools taking it actually shrunk the curve. So the difference between being below average and excellent in terms of that engagement, there's a very small, span of numbers between not good and really good. So just know that.
Dr. Gorman, on the unsatisfactory, there used to be mandated state situations where they had to be remediated. Is that going to be applicable?
Yes, sir.
In other words, these unsatisfactory schools, are they going to be given an improvement plan by the state? And if so, are we going to be monitored? And we used to have principal specialist come in for unsatisfactory schools. We're not going back to that, I hope.
No, sir. Those 2 schools will have to write a plan. They get an amount of money based on the number of students in the school, and they have to submit, progress monitoring and evaluation data of their plan. So they're just getting money and have to submit a plan on the front end. That's as much as I know at this point.
I have a question. The EOCs so my child is at Berkeley Middle School, and she's taking Algebra 1, whatever. So do her EOCs count for Berkeley High School, or does that have a rating at Berkeley Middle School?
That was a change, yeah.
Her scores will count for whatever high school she's enrolled in when she graduates.
So all those kids who are taking those courses and having success at Berkeley Middle School, do they acknowledge those course successes?
Okay, so to clarify, and this was a big change. I'm not making this up. So the EOC results are for the graduating seniors last year. They may have taken that end of course exam as a middle school student or a freshman or a sophomore.
Or somewhere else.
4 years ago, but that data was reported on this report card.
That's very illogical.
And
I was trying to think of something really nice to say. Occasionally I think I'm on video,
and so
I should
ironically,
reel it
in 2014 was the last time we had a rated report card. So these EOCs are actually reported twice. They were reported on the EOC report card, in 2014 report card, and now for these kids that were 8th graders or freshmen at the time.
We picked them up on this evaluation.
Right. So if
so it's not actually as much as children move in this district, which we know happens. It's not actually an accurate representation. It's just where they land when they graduate, not based on if they had a really good 8th grade teacher.
Right. And so Mr. Steele is processing all this. He has freshmen that are taking EOCs this year. That data will not be reported for 4 more years. So how is he going to improve his report card?
But what if that kid moves to Cane Bay? So Cane Bay gets the
So here's, and Mr. Steele might turn red when I tell this story, and you correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but if a student comes to us and they have an EOC from somewhere else, we are responsible for getting that documentation and sending it to the state, and if we don't do that, then we get gigged for not having those records. So for every kid coming to us, we have to make sure we document those EOCs and send that documentation to the state.
I wish booing was appropriate at school board meetings. I would just say, boo, this is not good. That is not good. That is
We can
illogical.
still do that.
We can still boo. Anne's in favor of booing.
Listen, I didn't take my blood pressure pill today.
So I have some good news.
That's good.
Moving along. So the 4 superintendents of the Low Country, Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester 2 and 4, I think felt pretty much the same way you did, and they said enough, and we want to do something different. So they have the Low Country College and Career Readiness Project, and so here are the big ideas the 4 superintendents had coming out of their meetings. So number 1, schools exist to provide opportunities for students they wouldn't otherwise have. The big one for me is that the high school exit credential, the diploma for students, is not currently the entrance ticket for young adults to be ready for their future. It used to be in the past, you got a high school diploma, you were pretty much guaranteed you were ready for college or the workforce or whatever. But now times have changed, and we've seen to that next bullet that multiple pathways to a successful future for students, such as credentials, 2-year degree, and college is not the only way. So those were sort of the big ideas behind this project. So essential questions were, how do we know what percentage of our kids are ready to include soft skills and academics, not just one or the other, for occupations identified in the local talent demand study? So we've been working closely with the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce on their talent demand study, their skills and high demand study, and we're really trying to meet the needs of our local business community, sort of I almost say in lieu of the state accountability report card, because it makes more sense to our local community and their needs. So the other is, how can we figure out what percentage of our kids are earning a 2-year college, a 4-year college, military, earning that credential or learning wage after they leave us finishing high school? Because, to those 4 superintendents, and to me this makes more sense. Are our kids being successful after they leave us, not how well did they do on a state test? There aren't necessarily correlations between the two. And this is a bit gooey, and I won't go through, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but this was really the work of a steering committee comprised of 16 people. I'll show you who they are in just a second, but we were to identify 2 to 3 soft skills, recommend a plan for moving to something very different than the state accountability model, figure out what ELA and math benchmarks we could put in place that aren't necessarily state standardized tests to let us know how our kids are doing in terms of being ready for our local talent demand, not just how they're doing on a state test. Look at 21st century learning, develop a framework for a Low Country report card, if you will, that provides information regarding soft skills and those ELA and math benchmarks. And when that bottom line or last point is very important, and other pertinent information that is easily understood by all stakeholders. There's actually a South Carolina Education Accountability Act of 1998. It's in law that our state report card should be easily understood by stakeholders. I think what she just showed you is not easily understood, So that's something that we want to do with this work. And I know those folks are hard to see. Just know that we've got 4 representatives from those 4 districts. We've got from our place, Sonia Addison Stewart. We've got Anthony Dixon, Hannah Studemeyer, and Nick Snyder. So those are our 4 representatives, as well as me on that steering committee. So they are the ones doing the work. We've identified these soft skills, communication, work ethic, and problem solving as our top 3. They came to consensus pretty quick on that. So these are just some straight out comments that those committee members had, coming to consensus on what we should do. And in short, the summary of this is we need to be looking at the whole child, not just standardized test results. So that's pretty much what those say. Also, this is pretty cool that we've had a lot of community outreach once our little project got underway. The Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce, specifically the Chief Advancement Officer, Tina Worth, met with Fran Welch at the College of Education, some of her professors, and other community members. Tallow, Cradle to Career, Engaging Creative Minds, Department of Ed, and the Education Oversight Committee are all aware of or a part of our work in some capacity. So we've come a long way since August or so, Dr. Ingram, is that about when we started that? Yep.
Yes, sir.
So if you have any questions for me or Ms. Cousins, glad to try and answer.
I think we've already voiced lots of concerns. I'm sorry,
just wanted to
Ms.
say-
Condor, I totally forgot that I'm not running this committee meeting, so apologies. I was about to move on, and it's not my thing.
That's okay, because right now I'm having to decompress a little bit. These types of things are very disturbing to me. And like I said, and voiced my concerns, I think these types of testing issues can be very deceptive. And I've heard it in some of our community meetings where we've had parents come up and say, well, the report card says this school was much better than that school. I've heard it from parents in my own district. And as far as I'm concerned, every school in our district is a good school. We have good teachers. We have good principals. And we're going to get better. And I don't believe in measuring the successes of our children based upon this kind of crap. And that's what it is. It's just crap. So, and I think the parents and students would stand behind me on that. I really do. So.
Dr. Gorman, are you spearheading this Low Country report card?
Yes, sir.
Are you basically the functionary, the person responsible for this, getting this done? And if so, what's the timeline on this to actually implement something like that? Because this is very important to actually get a good measurement about the readiness for all of our children, not just for the ones that are ready to go to college, but to be viable citizens, taxpayers, and wage earners. So I'd like you to speak to that.
Well, we've gotten a lot farther along than I anticipated. That steering committee, being from 4 different districts, I thought it would take a while for them to gel, but they really, much like you, see the same things going on here. I've always been told to underpromise and overdeliver, so I'm going to underpromise at this point. Hopefully by next year we'll have a platform that I think we can start to pilot in a few schools, have a resource that is free to us that we are currently using, that would directly provide data around what our students are doing in school, not just in terms of academics, but also social skills, engagement in athletics, Project Lead the Way, Beta Club, things of that nature. The 4 superintendents were 100% behind that idea, and so is the Charleston Metro Chamber of Commerce. We meet again on February 20th, where the steering committee will hear 2 data sources for communicating information for that platform. My hope is to have a landing page for high schools. I keep picking on Mr. Steele because he's here. So at Berkeley High School, you might have a link to the state and federal report card, because I want to own that data and put other data next to it. He would have another button with our Low Country report card information that I'm speaking to. But he could also provide additional buttons that highlight activities that go on in his school that he wants to brag about. My opinion is that the state and federal government really has a monopoly on reporting to our community and our parents how they value our school. And I just want to give them other information right next to it so that parents can peruse and look at other important items, if that makes sense.
That's what I'm talking about, and I'm glad to hear that we're on course with that. That's good to hear.
But also understand that right now, as Columbia looks at educational reform, my concern is this school district in this area is looking to do some big things and move our children forward and improve. This Educational Reform Act could end up being a cog in that effort. So I would implore all educators, all citizens, to get engaged and try to get informed as much as they possibly can, because now is the time that we can make a district as a school district and a state. But if people will not stand up and get informed and have their voices heard, they cannot expect anything different than what we've gotten in the past. So it is very, very important to get a part of the process at this time, because Columbia is going to make some significant changes. And if we want to trust Columbia to make the changes that are going to be good for our children, then let's trust them. If we want to get involved, if we want to be informed, now is the time. Thank you.
Well, I will add, too, that the 4 local districts, school districts, Charleston, us, and the Dorchester districts, are working very closely together. Now, you combine those 4 districts together, and you've got a mighty powerful voice in the state, okay, that can be heard at the state level. And I commend Dr. Ingram and his counterparts at the other districts for bringing this together, putting together these steering committees and moving this forward. This is one of the things that I had a vision for when I came on board with the school district. We got to do something. We've got to do something to improve the quality of education. Our children deserve that.
I just want to say I feel very comfortable that Berkeley is leading the way with you, Dr. O'Gorman, with your expertise, your experience, your wherewithal, and your overall passion to get this done. So I commend you, and I thank Dr. Ingram for spearheading this on the Tri-County area.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, with that, we'll move ahead.
Thank you.
The 4th agenda item is the International Baccalaureate program at Berkeley High. Principal Steele, you are recognized.
Thank you, ma'am, and other board members. At this time, what we're talking about doing is, and in your notes, we have some information in there. As the district's vision and mission is starting to get transformed by the board, the design teams, and other parts in the district, I started, along with other administrators at my school, looking at what Berkeley High School is doing. With what the district is moving forward with, I'm looking and reviewing all programs at Berkeley High School, how to be the most effective for our students at Berkeley High School, whether it's high level, mid-level, or low level, and making sure that there's equity for all levels. And in doing so, one thing we started looking at heavily was the International Baccalaureate program at Berkeley High School. The International Baccalaureate program is a program designed to help students prepare for college, after college, and in such a way as they're not taking one single course, but they're taking a program of study to help prepare for college life. So these are students who basically have decided they want to move on towards a college and college readiness and everything else. As we look at the mission and we look at the vision for Berkeley County School District, the one thing we have to look at is equity, to making sure that we're serving all of our students appropriately as best we can. With a new program such as the B4 program here at Berkeley County that's offering high school seniors the ability to earn massive amounts of college credit before they go off, through Trident Tech, through dual credit and everything else, you have to start looking at the financial resources, the HR resources, and the resources in general of what our students need to be successful. So we have to start looking at what makes a student successful for the next level, whether that is into the military, into the workforce, or into the college. Right now, from Berkeley High School, with a 105-year proud tradition, we have students who've gone to the academies. We've had students who've gone on to Harvard, Yale, to any other school that you'd want to go into. People who've done multimillionaires in business, in entertainment, in different fashions of everything in life, getting an education from Berkeley High School and Berkeley County School District. The issue with looking at the International Baccalaureate program is the amount of resources that it takes. So, as you saw in your notes, this year, the senior class, we have 20 students full-time inside. The junior class has 7 students. And so what we have to do is that the school, so a student is taking a class, one teacher might have 35 students in their classroom, one teacher might have 20, and one might have 7. Now, if the ultimate goal of the International Baccalaureate program is college readiness, which I totally agree with 100%, I had to question this in a logical way. College readiness or actual college? Through the B4 program that is now implemented through the district, we have students going to college now. My own daughter, using my own daughter as an example, who's made a decision for college now, she's going to be walking out with 18 hours through dual credit through Trident Technical College, which is accepted throughout the state of South Carolina because of the agreement set up between the technical colleges and the four-year schools. The International Baccalaureate program is not accepted throughout every school throughout the state of South Carolina. Now, as you look at the financial numbers that was provided, that number was just so we could have the IB program. That does not count any trainings, any taking for tests, anything else other than that. So when you start looking at the financial investment we're making through the IB program, you start to question yourself, why are we doing that when they could be taking these courses through Trident Tech, basically free and reduced lunch, or through regular students through the lottery tuition assistance to be able to attain the same thing. The other thing about the IB program is it's like the AP program. And if you've ever had children go through the AP program and all, they spend an entire year or semester preparing for the AP. If they have one bad day, girlfriend broke up with them, boyfriend broke up with them, they lost a game, they didn't do this, that, and the other, they have a bad test day, they get no credit. IB is basically all your tests are your senior year. Think about that. 2-week span, you're going to decide whether or not you get these college hours. Or you go through Trident Tech, and all of a sudden now you're just like when all of us went to college and everything else, you have the ability to go ahead, use all your test scores, all your classwork, everything else to be able to get the grade that you've actually earned. Because like I said, one bad day and it's no longer there. So in looking at it, my recommendation to this committee and also to the board is that we look at going ahead and phasing out the International Baccalaureate program at Berkeley High School, so that way we're more in line with the vision and mission of Berkeley County School District of making sure every child has all the abilities, all the resources available, and making it equitable. But also, let's face facts. I'm a parent with a senior who's going off to college. Right now, she's walking out the door with 18 hours guaranteed. If she'd gone through the IB program, which, to be quite honest with you, that was a heavy decision in my house, my daughter has dyslexia. She takes that test and bombs those tests, all that time that she spent is gone. Versus right now, walking out with 18 hours guaranteed. Mm-hmm. So I'm not looking at this as just as an administrator, but I'm also looking at this as a parent also for the best benefit of the students and the parents, because most of y'all who've either sent them to college or will at some point be sending them to college, and if they don't have a full scholarship for academics, full scholarship for athletics, or military with the GI Bill, that 18 hours just produced your checkbook tremendously with the amount of money that's having to come out, which is, I don't want to call it guaranteed, but you got a better shot of that than not. So that was my suggestion for the board.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I have a question, Mr. Steele.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. It's very enlightening. Do you currently have an additional allocation for the IB program in terms of teachers?
No, sir. We have a 0.5 extra allocation, and that 0.5 is for the director because of all the testing and everything else that goes along with the IB program.
So I think what you're basically saying is it basically negatively affects the classroom ratio when you have 5 or 6 kids in one class and employ a teacher to teach those when another class is overcrowded.
Yes,
so
sir.
You want to make it more equitable.
Yes, sir. And then the other thing is, too, if you think about it this way, is with the B4 program, Trident Tech's providing the teachers. Providing Tech has tried all this. So that's helped out right now with my program also. And this was the first year with the B4 program, so there's a lot of questions. A lot of parents were kind of skittish about it. I'm expecting the B4 program at Berkeley High School to actually double those numbers that you're seeing right now. And I would expect that throughout the entire district, because right now, and I've talked with Dr. Ingram and also the design committee, that I don't know if we're doing the justice to the B4 program yet, because the B4 program, I think, needs to be looked at as not just before college, but my brother has this very successful business, and he needs people with skill sets and certificates and everything else. My brother does not have a college degree, but he has 2 classes from Trident Tech of how you do the it just left me.
AutoCAD.
Thank you. AutoCAD. 2 classes of AutoCAD, and he's a multimillionaire. And why are our students taking the AutoCAD classes, taking the AC shop classes, the welding class? We have a lot of great CT programs here in Berkeley County School District that I give a lot of credit to our CT program for. There you go. There she is. I give a lot. And she does a fantastic job with it. But here's my question. is, are we really transferring to these students that if they did the automotive all the way through high school, all the way welding through high school and everything else, they should be going ahead and going to Trident Tech and going those further certifications while they're still a student for the Berkeley County School District. That helps our certifications, but then again, it also helps those students to get more pliable skills to the workforce, which we talk about here.
So the kids that are in the program now, we're saying we're going to phase those children just into, I know this was a magnet program.
Correct. So the idea that we came up with is if you're at Berkeley High School right now, you would stay in the program. So if you're a 9th or 10th grader, you stay at Berkeley High School, or you can turn to your home school if you so desire. If you're a junior rising into a senior, we will still, if you're still interested in the IB program, make sure that you have the ability to get those IB courses to be able to finish it out. Which we've already looked at the schedule to where, with Ms. Schaefer and myself, have already looked at the schedule to go ahead and we can figure out some places where we can put students to where they can get the double class credits to be able to ensure they're getting everything that they need to give them the best possible chance to do the IB.
Okay.
This shouldn't require any board action, I don't think. This is for information.
No, it doesn't require any more action. Well, thank you, Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Ms. Conder. Thank you, the board, for allowing me to speak.
Okay. The fifth agenda item is the second reading of the 2019-2020 instructional calendar. Deon Jackson, you are recognized.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Ingram, members of the board. Tonight we have the second reading of the 2019-2020 instructional calendar. Calendar has been posted, and since the first reading, there's been no questions, comments, or recommendations for change. I also want to add that at the last meeting, we discussed a possible appeal to the State Board of Education. That letter has been drafted and signed by Dr. Ingram and will be submitted to the State Board of Education. Unfortunately, they met this afternoon, so the next meeting is not until next month. So we won't know the findings at least until March. But with that, we bring the 2019 instructional calendar for second reading.
Okay, thank you. Do I hear a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I make a motion to approve the 2019 to 2020 instructional calendar for second and final reading as presented by administration.
I second that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Our sixth agenda item is inclement weather makeup days. Deon Jackson, you are again recognized.
Yes, ma'am. And this year, in the fall, did not disappoint us, as with the previous 5 years. We've had some severe weather occurrences or severe weather events, of which we've missed 5 instructional days. According to state law, we had the 3 weather makeup days, and we assigned all 3 weather makeup days, which leaves 2 remaining days. We hesitated to bring this agenda item to the board. We wanted to see what was going on with the month of January, which could be, have some winter weather, and also the month of February, which I think we're about over the hump. This is kind of the telling week, and it's quite warm outside, so I think we're past it. With that, according to state law, the local school boards are able to waive up to 3 days of inclement weather days. So with that, we're recommending to the board that we waive the 2 days. One day was September 14th. The other day was Thursday, October 11th, both 2018.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Just for clarification, these are 2 days that we're basically excusing, so we don't have to make these 2 days up per the General Assembly.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Madam Chair, I make a motion to approve Friday, September 14, 2018, and Thursday, October 11, 2018, as days missed to Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael in accordance with South Carolina House Bill 3890.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this committee meeting so that the Finance and Human Resources Committee meeting can begin.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. The motion carries. We are adjourned.
I'm calling the Committee on Finance and Human Resources to order. I declare there is a quorum of committee members present, and note that the media has been given proper notice pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act. Our first agenda item is out-of-state travel. Ms. Ashley Smith, you are recognized.
Good evening, Chairman Ramsey, members of the board, and Dr. Ingram. Administration is requesting a motion to approve all out-of-state travel as presented.
I move to approve the out-of-state travel request as presented by administration.
Second. All those in favor respond by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed respond by saying nay. The ayes have it by a vote of 3-0. Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you.
At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn so the Facilities and Capital Planning Committee meeting can begin.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor of adjourning respond by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Calling the Committee on Facilities and Capital Planning to order, I declare that a quorum of committee members are present and note that the media has been given proper notice pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act. We have 2 items on the agenda that are for information only. Dr. Parker, you're recognized to present on the district attendance lines and the 5-year capital projects plan update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the board members. Dr. Ingram, it's good to be with you tonight. We had two interesting public hearings on the issue over redistricting and looking at district lines. Mr. Ramsey, Ms. Condor were at the first meeting. Certainly commend you for being there and representing the board. At the second meeting at Sangaree Middle School, and Ms. Condor and Mr. Barrow were there and certainly did a good job. I'd like to commend Ms. Condor. It was a difficult situation. You had a lot of emotions there, but you handled it well, and I'd like to commend you for that. Anytime you're looking at changing schools and addressing parents in that way, it's always going to be a difficult proposition. But I wanted to go over with the board again tonight what I presented earlier regarding the direction that we were recommending to you in looking at our future planning and the recommendations that we were making to the board. Long-range planning, and this is something, as Dr. Ingram passes out the information to you from the public hearings, you're going to see a couple of comments there about long-range planning and the encouragement to the board for long-range planning. Certainly, the board is entertaining this at this point in time, and you're looking at this closely. So the public has got to understand this based on the media getting the information out, and certainly our public information officer getting the information out. But this is taking place. What we have done, a master facility plan. We've looked at the establishment of a construction department, which we have. We're giving you data updates and development of a strategic plan. And part of the strategic plan is looking at short-range actions, which you are part of, in reviewing the district lines and looking at the public's comments on the district lines. This is important. Address utilization of facilities through this effort. Evaluate the use of outdated buildings or on various campuses. Evaluate the use of temporary classrooms, whether to use them or to look at bricks and mortar down the road. The other part, mid-range options, determine viable funding. That's what this board is all about right now. You're looking at items that have been recommended as far as impact fees and a sales tax to give you funding sources to improve schools, to renovate schools, and to build new schools. and I'm not going to go through and read all this again, but your mid-range funding source is going to be impact fees. And I would encourage you strongly, Mr. Chairman, to look at a resolution from this board to the county council on implementing impact fees and exploring that in a way that would make it a viable option to renovate schools based on growth. And the other part of that is a resolution to your state delegation on a sales tax for school construction in Berkeley County. Now, to get back to our issue at hand here in reviewing our meetings, one of the questions that came from the board members and the map that I am displaying up here now, you've got it in your packets that were handed out to you earlier. This map impacted 485 students. One option out of a number of options that we looked at as possibilities. The one problem with this that we heard, and you can look at it on your map again, the one problem that we heard is this was going to split up the Sangaree area. Now, typically when you're going to do redistricting, you want to have a definite dividing line. Usually it's done with the geographical
Boundary.
opportunities that you have within that district, a river or something of that nature, or you have a major road. And here you got a major road, which is 17 and 26 right here. This option we carried to the public at our public hearing, and we got a great deal of information based on the public hearing.
We did.
One option. A second option that the superintendent asked us to look at, this one takes in all of the area in the grid from 17 all the way to Stratford High School there. So everything on from 17 over toward Stratford would be in the Stratford district.
So I'm spatially challenged. That's
Yes.
my LD. So if I'm driving from past Piggly Wiggly on 17A, so you're telling me when I'm sitting at the bank at the big stoplight at Carnes Crossroads, everything in this quadrant would go to Stratford and everything on the other 4 quadrants would go to Caneback?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And that's basically what this says here.
Okay.
Now, the one drawback with this option is that it impacts about 800 students.
That's a lot of kids.
And if we look at our capacities at Stratford, that it's going to put Stratford over their capacity. That is a little bit of a concern, but I'll talk about that a little bit more after this. I'll show the other option to you. The third option, wait a minute. Third option here, in this one, it takes, you still have the 17 as your boundary for the Sangaree district going to Stratford, but you take out everything to the Dorchester side of I-26. And the number of students, you got that in your diagram, the number of students is about 700 kids. Now, in evaluating all 3 of these, what you want to look at is what will this mean to the future as far as your schools? What impact will it have? Well, the boundary being 17 here is an important boundary, I believe. And the other factor you have to take into account is 5 years down the road, you're going to be coming back and looking at this again from the standpoint of manipulating these boundaries for Stratford High School again. Now, the Stratford High School, if you look at your out-of-capacity charts, Stratford High School has capacity for about 700 additional students right now. And even though this might put them over 3 years down the road, the Stratford district is really not growing. They are in an area that is aging out. The Crowfield Plantation area and all the developments in there are really aging out from the standpoint of school-age kids. So their numbers are going to be going down in the years to come, where the Cane Bay numbers are going to be going drastically upward. So for your consideration, we are offering these three options to you to consider. In addressing these boundaries for Stratford High School and relieving the overcrowded conditions at Cane Bay High School.
So, Tony, if I'm understanding the feedback that we've gotten, which I know we haven't gone through completely, but scenario C takes into consideration splitting the community. So it keeps that community together, but it also is sustainable numbers for Stratford High School, so the numbers match the seat capacity available.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
Well, my concern is with the growth that we're having, and I even, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought initially we were even going across 17A over there into the Carnes Crossroads, or was that never part of the thought process?
That's another issue that I'll mention. Let's get through the high school one, and that's the elementary issue that we had the public hearing at Devon Forest. But we can talk about that in just a minute. Wanted to get through the high school one with you.
Because with me, scenario B is the one out of A, B, and C is the logical one, because I'm very much aware that 17A is a main neighborhood barrier. So as far as splitting up some of Sangaree and continuing having them go to Cane Bay and then have some go to Stratford doesn't seem like scenario B is what looks best as far as from what I'm looking at.
Using 17 as the boundary there.
Yes, sir. Yeah. That's what makes logical sense to me.
I think I'd have to maybe agree with Sally as far as C goes. At least we're not splitting up a street or a neighborhood where one side of the street goes to Cane Bay and one side goes to Stratford, because that was the biggest complaints I've heard personally. But as far as the numbers go with Stratford, not growing, I guess, projecting that's going to be growing, the numbers seem like they would be accurate.
The real question is whether you want to be aggressive at this point in time and looking at being aggressive. The Model C is a little less aggressive. Yeah. Model B more aggressive, and Model A is something where Stratford would not be out of capacity.
Yeah, I was there at the meeting, and I was hearing a lot of the concerns, of course, by the parents and by the people in the neighborhood. And I think scenario C is really the best option. There are kids that have grown up together, and splitting children up just did not sound like a real attractive thing to some of these parents and these children. And I tried to speak to the children in particular at these meetings. And you could see the angst that these kids were going through. And, I think really and truly using these two main thoroughfares or main highways as the boundary will certainly help cut down on that kind of angst and splitting these children up. Some going to Stratford and some going to Cane Bay, and my friend's going to be in Cane Bay and I got to go over to Stratford now. And, but this is probably the best boundary option that I see, in addition to
C or B and?
C.
C, okay.
Yeah. In addition to the fact that we're going to be looking at the number of children, too, that will be occupying the school. But barring the boundary issues, there were other issues that some of the parents were concerned about, too, and we'll table that for a later discussion. But I think this is probably going to be the best scenario.
I'd like to tell you, Dr. Parker, that I commend you for presenting other options to us, because I was there and there was a lot of concern, a lot of anger and angst, and they didn't want to split the Sangaree community. We needed to have a contiguous all the way to 17A. Now, I don't know how much information you want to hear from me tonight, but I've really looked at this in depth and talked to a lot of people in the community, and I have some numbers. I think what we're talking about ultimately is possibly grandfathering the children that are currently at Cane Bay High School. That would be the current 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Really, the students that would be impacted
Just showing you a blow up of this so you can see it a little clearer.
This is the original.
That's correct.
That was the issue in the middle.
That's where they were going to be split up.
Yeah, that's a lot easier to see
I
there.
think either B or C is the ones that make sense to me.
Yeah, this is the piece that I don't know as much about.
That's what I'd like to address.
What I don't know is if we're over aggressive now, are we going to have to push back later? And that makes me concerned. I don't want to say, go here today, and 2 years later we're going to do something else. I want to make a long play for what's the right decision. Y'all look like Vanna White.
I'd like to wait until they finish the demonstration, and then I'd like to continue with what's some information that I have.
There's a piece I don't know.
Thank you, Sparky.
Thank you.
You know, if you go down, if you go down 17, and you reach that point where the interstate is, there's not that much of a connection.
There. Dr. Ingram thought I was reading it upside down. I told him, no, I'm coming from the way I'm driving. I'm driving from Monk's Corners, so
But
I want to see it.
is not connected to the other side of I-26.
Of I-26.
Maybe just
that neighborhood right there.
Yeah, let me speak to that.
Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Actually, what we're talking about, I think the board agrees, and Dr. Parker, we've had some conversations. We're not talking about.
No, there's St. James right there, actually. So yeah, so that is.
We're not talking about current Cane Bay High School students being affected. We're talking about rising ninth graders from one school. That's Sedgefield Middle School. I mean, not Sedgefield, Sangaree Middle School. There are currently 257 eighth graders at Sangaree Middle School. If we did option 2, which includes all of the boundary on this side on the Somerville side of 17A, you're talking about, of those 257, you're talking about 186 going to Stratford and 61 going to Cane Bay. Because there's still some kids on the other side of 17A that will go to Cane Bay that are currently still going to Sangaree Middle. Do you follow what I'm saying? There's 257 kids in the 8th grade. If we took option 2.
You're referring to B, option B?
Option B, correct. We're talking about 61 still going to Cane Bay because they're on the other side of 17A. 186, which is a good number for me, Okay, because that alleviates 186 kids going to Cane Bay, going to Stratford, and in 2 years you still aren't going to be at capacity at Stratford. So you got some room for growth. Stratford is declining in numbers. And here's the other thing. If you go with option 3, or what'd you say? C. You know how many kids are affected if you leave that to Cane Bay? 16. 16 currently. There are 16 kids in that section, that quadrant in C, that go to Sangaree Middle School. So then you'd have 170 going to Stratford and 77 going to Cane Bay. Now, if you look geographically, which is the closest high school to all of that land west of I-26? It's obviously a Stratford. How can you access Stratford from the left side of I-26? Well, you go down Highway 78 to College Park Road, and you're right there. It might take 12 minutes. Go to Cane Bay, it might take 25 minutes with traffic, maybe 30. So, and the other thing Dr. Parker alluded to is if you don't get it fixed now, you're going to have to come back later because Cane Bay is going to grow. Whether we take 180 kids every year for 4 years, yes, that will impact Stratford in terms of about 700 to 800 over the course of 4 years. So you say, well, Cane Bay is going to not grow by those 180 kids, but they are because they're growing in numbers of 140 to 150 per year because of natural growth. Okay, so what I'm saying to you is he's exactly right, because we would have the boundary of 17A, and Sally, if you're going from Somerville, to Monk's Corner.
In terms of Monk's Corner.
If you're going from Somerville to Monk's Corner, everything on the right of 17A goes to Stratford.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the 3 options. Option A is really not an option because we caught the devil back up there at Sangaree, and rightfully so, because they don't want children to be split. They don't want the communities, one side of the street, kids going to Stratford, another side, they're going to Cane Bay. But 186 kids out of the existing 257 at Sangaree would go to Stratford. 61 would still go to Cane Bay. And Cane Bay's growing, folks. If we don't do something this year, right, in the next short period of time, we're talking about we're going to have to make decisions on who's going to be grandfathered in terms of athletic teams, in terms of choral programs, in terms of band programs, in terms of every sort of exception you can imagine. We're going to have all sorts of exceptions, so we need to get it done as quickly as possible. And if we need to have another community meeting, so be it. And that's my little 3-minute dissertation, and it took 10. I'm sorry.
Typically, and Mr. Bear is correct, typically what you're looking at is a 4-year span of time to get the numbers that we have down on the sheet, the impacted numbers. And Cane Bay is the major growth area in the district at this point in time. The real question that you have, originally what we did with the original option that we gave you was to address it from the standpoint of getting all the schools out of a situation where they're out of capacity, Cane Bay and all the other schools. But again, with the 3 options, looking at the boundary lines, B and C have the best boundary lines. The key question for you is whether you want to be aggressive in looking at C or a little less aggressive with B. That's your call to make. Now, when you look at a lot of the comments in the documentation that our PIO and her staff gathered for us at these meetings, they did a thorough, excellent job of giving us the information from the attendees. And a lot of these are emotional comments. And you can categorize probably 50% of them as emotional comments. And then you look at the real concerns that people have. And they just want a decision made, and they like to know as early as possible from you as to what that decision is so they can start planning for the future. One thing that Mr. Bear brought up is grandfathering. In every district I served as a superintendent where we adjusted district lines, there was grandfathering that took place for the kids at a high school. In other words, if you've got kids at Cane Bay now in the freshman, sophomore, junior years, then you grandfathered them to allow them to stay at that school because they've already bought their letter jackets, they've already bought annuals, they bought class rings, those kind of things. So the grandfathering is something that you need to really decide as a board if you're going to allow that. Certainly you can't provide the transportation, but you can allow for the grandfathering if that's what you choose to do here. And I think it's a good thing to do when you look at a high school.
I think grandfathering allows a way to phase in year by year and not disrupt someone's high school years.
That's right. That's right. All right, Mr. Chairman, any other questions on this?
No, sir.
All right. And Mr. Ramsey, what you brought up was the issue that we brought to the public at Devon Forest as far as the elementary school. This is the map of the elementary school, and that's one to consider. But in all honesty, in reviewing this, a lot of different factors need to be taken into account. And I would point out the one factor is looking at your funding sources and getting impact fees in place. You're really going to have to work with your developers in order to do that. And if you can garner support from your developers in so doing, in some cases you may want to make some concessions from the 17 line up. Now here, you would be crossing 17 to shift these students at Carnes Crossing into Devon Forest and within the Stratford district. That's one that you really might want to consider other options, but that's a decision you've got to make. What I wanted to provide you with are options to address the overcrowded conditions that we have at Cane Bay Elementary and Cane Bay Middle School. Any questions on these two?
How many kids will be affected in that one, Dr.
You had about 81 kids, and that's a transition over a few years.
So they go to Devon and then to College Park?
That's correct.
And then to Stratford?
But if you look at your high school decision, Mr. Barra,
yeah,
if you're crossing over 17,
it impacts that as well, yeah.
You got another issue there as far as crossing over 17. If you want to use 17 as that boundary line.
Yes.
I think you should. I think the highway is a boundary that people can understand and respect. And it's not like, hey, across the street and kids go to a different school. It's across 4-lane highway. We're not crossing over to go ride the bike over there.
It just makes sense to have that as a permanent boundary for a district line.
Well, if we're looking at as far as concessions and looking at goodwill and figuring out how the development, and we understand we're going to need more elementary schools and more middle schools, then that's something that the district needs to go ahead and start having some of those discussions now, wouldn't you say? Whether as just assuming, well, because we try to do something in goodwill, that then some developers want to do something in goodwill for us, just isn't an assumption that I would want to make.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah,
You got some
no
tough
more-
decisions to make.
No more free land. I want us to find where we're going to build schools next and buy good property, and don't give us free stuff. Thanks, though.
All right, we have revised the capital projects 5-year plan, and I want to go over that briefly with you at this point in time. And in the revision, we have added an elementary school based on additional information we've got with the growth coming into Berkeley County. You've got 2 developments since we presented this plan to you specifically in this area that is going to have a dramatic impact on the Moncks Corner area of the county. And if you look at the developers that plan to develop these pieces of land, it could come pretty fast. And that's kind of a scary proposition when you're trying to build new schools to accept the new students coming in from these rooftops. What we're working on right now with the 4 schools, and one of these schools the first one would be a new middle school, and this would be in the area near Nexton. Matter of fact, the circle comes pretty close to the Nexton Elementary School. A new elementary school that would be in the I-26 Carter area, the Jedburgh Road area. Another new middle school that would address the situation that you've got at Fox Bank and really shift a lot of things in that direction. And another elementary school, again, above the Jedburgh Road area. That area is really going to take off. These 4 schools, we need to be planning for them now, even though we don't have a funding source for them. And hopefully that funding source will be coming in the very near future. All the more reason for resolutions for impact fees and resolutions for a 1-cent sales tax.
The high school. What about a possible high school? I mean, with all the...
You're going to have a high school. Now, one of the things we're trying to do with the redistricting here is give you a little more time, a little more of a cushion, so that you don't have to have a high school, Mr. Wright, at least for 5 to 7 years, the planning for it. Depending on the growth spikes that we have in Berkeley County, it may come sooner than that. This year we were anticipating a 700 student growth. We had 1,000. I think the potential for Berkeley County, based on all the economic factors, is you could have spikes up to 1,500, 2,000 students a year. Now, if you start having that, you got to have resources to build these new schools and renovate the older campuses. Classroom additions immediately. This has been revised. Bricks and mortar at Cane Bay Middle School, 19 additional classrooms there. And that's taking it pretty much up to a maximum capacity as far as Cane Bay Middle School. Cane Bay Elementary School, and these are in priority order. Additional 12 classrooms there. Sangaree Middle School, 12 classroom addition there, based on the fact that school, the size is smaller than we would typically recommend for a middle school. And if you look at your out of capacity chart, it is out of capacity now based on that chart. School renovations, these are taking place now. Mount Holly Elementary School, and those items under there are taking place currently with the Abbeville funding that the school district received. And the demolitions pretty much staying the same. Now, a question that's come from a couple of board members, that you don't see some other schools on here. This document was done based on trying to achieve funding from impact fees and sales tax. This document was not done from a bond perspective. Typically, if you got a bond perspective, we're going to put a bond out here for $200 million, then it would be more comprehensive. If we get the sales tax and we know how much sales tax is going to generate, then we will come back with a more comprehensive list at that point in time. But these are priority items that your staff and I believe need to come first and foremost as far as your facility planning is concerned. Some of these are demolitions. I talked to you about demolitions at our last, when I presented the total facility package. Questions?
We have a timeline or general idea in terms of our efforts for the impact fees or sales tax? Any idea how?
Well, what really is going to generate this is you got to do a resolution as a board. Pass a resolution as a board to present this to your county council, and then a resolution that you're going to present to your state delegation, legislative delegation, as far as sales tax. And legal counsel at the current time is working on some of this. Dr. Ingram, Mrs. Wofford, and I met with a developer on the issue of impact fees, and really you want the whole community to come together on this. You don't want to have elements of the community fighting you on this. And I know, Ms. Condra, how difficult those public meetings were. Okay. And we were there with you. But one point that we got across is we got to build schools. Mm-hmm. And we don't have a funding source right now to build schools. So we need to generate support for the sales tax and the impact fees.
And my feeling about the impact fees is if you want to move to Berkeley County, which is a great county, then you're going to have to pay to move here.
Yeah.
It's the developer paying too, right? It's new houses on the impact fees.
It would be
the Home Builders Association.
Well, it's passed on to the homeowner.
The homeowner, it is passed on to them. They're going to add it into the price of the home. But you're exactly right.
You've got to work through a single home impact fee, a multi-unit, what you'll do with the multi-unit, and all of that has to come from county council. But I mean, the first thing you have to do is start talking with developers, because they're building homes and they want to be able to sell homes, and they want to know that the infrastructure is going to support the homes that they're building. So,
they just don't want to pay for it.
Huh?
I said they just don't.
Well, no one wants to pay for it. But I don't, I think we can move together if it's a reasonable impact fee that we can get buy-in from the county council side. But we need to generate some support with the community and with developers. You don't want to be at odds with developers when you go to county council.
Well, there needs to be a cooperative effort, mm-hmm. and a coming together to do what needs to be done for Berkeley County. And I think most of you developers will join you in implementing impact fees as long as it's presented to them in the right way. And
because
I think
most places do have impact fees. That's what something folks need to understand. We are quite unique in Berkeley County when we got rid of our impact fees. Cities such as Mount Pleasant and counties across America have impact fees. So it's not a absurd issue that we would, it's very reasonable that we would request impact fees.
And the meeting we had with one developer, he was very positive about impact fees and his willingness to support impact fees from the standpoint of an understanding that his business is bringing a lot of people into this county.
And also, most developers know that they want the new schools because that's going to help promote and sell the homes that they're going to be developing.
Without the schools, there is no $500,000 homes.
Developed there with the developer as well for the new schools. I've never been around any developer that did not want new schools because You want those schools nearby.
Yeah, most of them will donate land to you. we just want
If we give them goodwill, they will.
we just want quality land if we have it donated.
Dr. Parker, have we actually considered, and I understand the need for the elementary, middle, but I'm very concerned about the high school growth. Berkeley High is almost at capacity. I think Mr. Steele would attest to that. Cane Bay is over capacity. Stratford can handle 300 to 400. But if we don't do something in the next 5 years with high schools, it could create a snowball effect in terms of attendance lines having to be redrawn because of the overall. Because in 4 years, as we know, we're talking about Stratford having about 700 to 800 additional kids with the Sangaree kids. Cane Bay, and of course, they're going to be over capacity by at least 200 to 300 at that time in 4 years. So I'd like to see us at least consider a high school in this 5-year plan, maybe one of each, because if my math is correct, it usually takes about $25 million to build an elementary and about $30 million to build a middle. So you're talking about maybe $120 million to do these 4 projects. And then if you really try to figure in a high school there, you're looking at about $150 million if you do one of each. Now, I realize that's a lot of money, but the impact of not doing a high school, if we wait 8 to 10 years to build a high school, that is very, very problematic.
Well, what we're trying to do, based on the cost of the high school, is push it out as far as we can at this point. When you talk about planning for a high school, it takes you a couple of years.
I agree.
To plan for the high school correctly. Mm-hmm. So even though it's not on the 5-year plan here, mm-hmm. in 5 years you're going to have to start planning for that high school if you're going to open it up in year 10 of the plan. Now, the high school issue is going to be more critical if you have the spikes in growth. And we all know that. At this point in time, we have no funding sources that we can depend on. But what we're trying to focus on, the superintendent has directed us to focus on prototype models in getting ready. We've got a procedure, a process in place currently. We haven't brought it to the board yet, but we will be doing that in evaluating school sites and also looking at contracts for architects and contractors in the future. So the planning for this, we're trying to put in place now. The board is going to have to put funding up in order to do RFQs on prototype models. And what I would suggest to the board is getting shovel ready for the elementary, the middle schools, and the high schools by doing the prototype models, designing our 21st century learning environments. Currently, the construction staff is working on ed specs. The Berkeley County educational specifications for the construction of schools that we will give to the architects that are selected to do the prototype models, and we will work with them on that planning process in putting in place what we believe is the most prudent direction to go in as far as designing the schools. But this is something that we're going to be bringing to you in the next couple of months to go ahead with the prototype models, do the RFQs on the renovations here, and address it based on the funding sources that we hope we're going to have and the current funding sources that we do have, based on your, Ashley's not going to want to hear this, but fund balance in addressing these prototype models. But what we're trying to do is put together for the board a direction that puts us in a position where we're making good decisions, quality decisions, and we can get the schools built in a cost-effective manner. It was interesting. I was in a meeting with an architect that this board has used, and the architect in the meeting made a comment that nobody is perfect. They had made mistakes on the design, the plans for a school. They left out structural steel, but they said they were not perfect. And that was paid for out of the board's contingency. Now, I don't quite understand how you take board contingency and you pay for a mistake of this caliber of a professional. Now, my question to them, you got errors and omissions insurance. Why wasn't that charged to you, errors and omissions insurance? Wasn't a viable answer to that. But what we want to do in the future, what your superintendent wants to see, and I know you do, is get responsible people to do the work, quality work for Berkeley County and the citizens of this county in a cost-effective manner. And if you design that school, then by God, it's going to be correctly designed, and you don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
If you need to check the plans, then check them 10 or 15 times before you put them in the hands of a contractor.
Measure twice, cut once.
Right.
That's right.
I mean,
Exactly.
and Tony, you've done a great job. And Mike Miller, I was excited. You and I both worked with Mike in North Carolina, and he produced these maps in a day, Mr. Barrow. I mean, it was a day. And when I was talking to a county councilman on Saturday, you were there, and a couple of the board members were there, and he was sharing with me his concerns from his constituency.
Yep.
Because they're not going to call me, they're going to call people they know, and I understand that. But these maps was an attempt to listen to the community.
That's right.
And I think it shows, I commend the board for it, because then the board is listening to the community, and you're trying to the best of your abilities to make concessions where you can make concessions. But Mr. Miller would also, in his circles, he can project growth about where you would need a high school. So, at least in my opinion, it's better in a perfect world, if you can, you flip the conversation so that you identify a potential site, purchase the site, but you can't do that now because you don't have a funding source to do it.
Right.
And then maybe put up a sign saying future Berkeley County High School, or future school, and then developers will actually develop around that. So, we have a bigger hand in that say. And when we have landlocked schools, we also have those issues. So when properties become available adjacent to landlocked schools, my recommendation, with proper funding sources, of course, you purchase that land so that even if you had to tear down an old house and make it a parking lot, or because we've got several high schools that are really, or a couple of high schools that are really landlocked, and we need to think about those things because we're certainly not going to be abandoning those campuses in our lifetimes. So there's a lot more to it, but I just want to commend Dr. Parker and Mike Miller for these maps, because I think it shows that you were listening carefully to your public. And I think this is a mind shift for the county in comparison to what we were doing. And Tony's absolutely right. I'm very familiar with those conversations with the architects and the contingency, and it just, I got to be honest, it just baffled me why in the world there would be control. We should control the contingency. And a guaranteed maximum price in my world, a GMP, that's the guaranteed maximum price, not all these add-ons, But anyway, I'll stop there. But I think going forward in future projects, we'll be in much better shape. Tony, I think you would agree.
Yes.
And I second what Dr. Ingram said. Dr. Parker, you've done an awesome job. I think your projections give us a direction without which we probably wouldn't even know where to go and what we needed to do, other than the fact that, we know we need to build schools, but trying to figure out how to prioritize that is tricky business. And, going back to what Mr. Barrow said, yes, I know we're going to need a high school, definitely, within the next 7 to 10 years, and maybe even sooner than that. But it goes back to the funding issue. And I think that we as a board need to go ahead and prioritize getting a resolution put together, or getting some resolutions put together for our county council, and as well as our state legislature. So thank you for that.
I like to-do lists, so we need resolutions for the county and for the local delegation. And I'm really sorry, my kid had a basketball game, so I missed the most fun meeting that you guys had. Do we want to try to go back to the community with guidance on grandfathering and these maps to try to answer questions? Do we want to put it out on social media? What do we want to do next to continue? I don't want to wait until another committee meeting in a month before we decide how we're going to re-engage back with the community. So what are people, you feel like we need to go back and meet in person?
Actually, I think that's probably a good idea, because people were a little bit concerned about not having a public forum and having one question answered uniformly, and instead of having it diversified with 4 different groups meeting in 4 different areas, different questions being asked, different answers being told. If you have, and this is another very important point, if we do that, if we go back to the Sangaree community, Stratford, Cane Bay, Sangaree communities, we let them know that we listened, that we are involved in that conversation, and we're not going to do anything without them actually having some more input into it. Now, I think time is of the essence, Madam Chair. I think it's critical, especially with, I've had people talk about choral programs, JV and varsity football, spring practice coming up. Who are we going to grandfather in? When is this going to happen?
I think people are stressed.
We've got to have some answers, but before we make a judgment ourselves, I said this a while back, there's 2 types of leadership. One is bottom down, the other one's top up. Bottom up, top down. I think if we go back to the community and listen to them, they can share with us what their thoughts are on these 3 options. And I think that's always positive, but we'd have to do that very, very soon. And I'd like to have the full board there to kind of have some unified comment.
If we want a microphone, we should do a public forum here and let people come see the maps. If we want to set aside time to hear people speak individually.
Because I got a lot of the same feedback as they did want a forum. They did want as many of us to speak directly to us. It was a lot of the feedback when we got together versus where we had it set up in different stations. They did
so we can try to schedule something here at a different time than the board meeting. And I don't know when that's.
But if you want a more formal setting like that, it needs to be here with y'all up there.
I agree.
What we were trying to accomplish with the communities is no decision had been made. We were trying to make it more personal to where they could come up to y'all, ask questions. But I think if the community wants the formal setting, then I agree. I think it needs to be here for communication purposes and things like that.
Then you can video it. It can be a formal meeting. We can video it.
Some of y'all were there for some of the community conversations we did. We piloted doing like virtual meetings. So we could, make it a virtual thing where people could also see it if they're not able to get here. But I just kind of think if you want it to be more formal, then you're probably going to need to.
I think we need to present the options, and then I think we also need to have some outline of what grandfathering would look like, because people really, right? What do people care about? My kid. I care about my special situation. I have this child doing this and that child doing that, and are you going to split this kid from that kid? And those are my friends, and I just moved here. People are worried about their individual situations, so they need that guidance of what we're going to grandfather. So they can feel comfortable that they could read that and say, okay, here's how this would apply to my individual situation.
Madam Chair, you think this boardroom would be
Big enough?
big enough? Because when you start to get into some serious stuff, people are going to start to hear more and they're going to pay more attention, and now they're going to come out. I don't know if this boardroom is big enough.
If the space is
Whatever you want to do.
big enough.
It's
What if
fine.
we,
I'm
yeah,
just
what if we
wondering.
had a board meeting at one of the local schools that are in the area that's affected?
You want to have it at Stratford, so it would invite,
We actually have considered, once we talk more about it, that is an option, is to have it at Stratford. And I guess we could set it up the way we do when we do a
board meeting there.
somewhere else. If that's what y'all kind of desire, is a more formal.
Well, I think I feel like just some of this feedback, people want that more formal, be heard on the microphone. And then some of this feedback was, you need to be able to highlight what Stratford offers. So maybe.
Presentation format too,
So we could give some information about the program Stratford offers, let them see the facility. Somebody, it's not overcrowded. Someone said it's already overcrowded. It's not overcrowded. You haven't visited there in a while. So maybe some information about Stratford. They can get to see the facility. We can outline what grandfathering would look like, and then give these options, and then have a time set up for 3 minutes of speaker, just like we do here.
Ground rules are important because you want it to be productive.
I think
If you let it without good structure, then it could become a Donnybrook, and that's not productive. You want it structured so that
we can get feedback
good,
and move on. I
strong
think
feedback.
similar to how we do it here.
I think you set it
I
up
think
just like citizen comments, and set up an agenda with a presentation and citizen comment rules, and let it be a full extra board meeting, which Stratford might be thrilled that we're going to pick a night for them to come to be there. But
And I think when you take it to the community, they have more of a shared experience in what's happening, versus coming here, we're taking it to them because they're being affected by it, and now it's going to be convenient for them to participate and attend those meetings. I think it'd be much better to take it to the community.
So how soon do y'all want to go on it?
Madam Chair, may I make a suggestion that if we do this next week, I would suggest that the board have a workshop to work some of these concerns and some of these questions out, so that we'll all be on the same page. When there's a question asked, we can all have the same answer about JV football or the band or the choral program, or who's going to be affected. If I've got a child that's going to go to Cane Bay and I've got a rising ninth grader, you're going to split my child. Is that going to be an attendance exception? There are going to be academic exceptions discussed, because there may be a couple of programs at a particular school that, for example, Cane Bay has a sign language program. Stratford doesn't, but Stratford has programs Cane Bay doesn't either. But people will want to know what allowances and what exceptions we're going to actually allow. And if we are not on the same page, if we don't come together and make these judgments in advance, or at least have an idea about what they're going to ask us, because I know what they're going to ask us. So they've already asked us a lot of these things, and they're concerned about a lot of things. But I'm just suggesting that maybe we meet one evening or afternoon, or whenever it's convenient for most of the board members, to actually go through this scenario and come up with some ideas prior to the actual community meeting.
But I don't know. I'm just going to give my opinion here. But in most of these that I've experienced, your superintendent, your curriculum chairperson, and others are the people that are really answering the questions. As the board, we're there, but that's not our job. That's why we hire our superintendent to be able to answer those questions. Now, once we have talked about what the real concerns are, the important things, then our superintendent will deliver that message for us. The board chair is open to me, just like we do here. We have our superintendent, we have the curriculum person, Dr. Parker, who's the consultant here. And these folks get together and they answer those questions, because the board, I really don't think that we should be doing that, because whatever the superintendent is saying is we support that particular initiative. I mean, that's my perspective. Now, if you want to do it different, you can, because I think that's why you have so many different answers, because this is the bell cow, Dr. Ingram. I really don't need to be speaking. I can shake hand and speak and also endorse what he said or what Dr. Park is saying, or Dr. Kim O'Gorman in terms of curriculum, but everything else, we're just there to give that support for the community.
I hear you. That's a very valid point, Frank. You're exactly correct. But
What if we do the meeting in 2 weeks on the Thursday? So we will meet on Tuesday and then try to either have the meeting on Wednesday night or Thursday night, which would make us have 2 meetings in a week. But any action that needs to be taken could be taken on the 26th for us to be prepared to meet with the community on the 27th or the 28th.
And I'm happy to do those things, Mr. Wright, but I think it would be helpful if the board could discuss some of the parameters so that I'm executing in my answers and conversations the will of the board.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the parameters is going to deal with grandfathering.
Right.
Typically, my experience with high schools, all the current students at that high school would be grandfathered.
Absolutely.
That makes it very straightforward.
That's very straightforward. I mean,
Then I don't have to worry about if you sing in the chorus and you play strings, but you're in sign language. If you are already there, my concern are the 7th and 8th grade kids who've established eligibility with the other high school. Those kids, I think we would need to consider some exceptions on. So I'm putting everybody on the spot. So if we do whatever work that's necessary to get those parameters on the 26th, February 26th agenda, and then we would try to coordinate the 27th or 28th. That's a Wednesday or a Thursday, possibly. That's in 2 weeks.
27th is our honors band.
Okay, I will say, good. Somebody's got to tell me the right answer. So possibly the 28th.
And I'll just need to check with Stratford to make sure.
They don't have anything else going on. If those dates don't work, then we'll push into March the 5th, which is like 3 weeks from now. I hope it's not that long, but I'd rather the work get done and have a productive
So
meeting.
we're saying February 28th or March 5th, right?
Yes, are my two proposals at this time.
still we have preferential.
We have, yeah. You want to see us? We'll get, yeah. The band can play after we talk. No, I'm just joking. So Thursday the 28th or Tuesday, March the 5th are the two preferable dates, and that'll give us time to make the agenda on the 26th. And Dr. Parker and Dr. Ingram, Mr. Jackson have experience with how we've grandfathered in the past, how it's been done in other places. So some kind of proposal for grandfathering guidelines on the 26th. We can take whatever action necessary then, and then you'll have guidance when we go to the meeting.
Some of the key comments in the documents that you have before you there, most people just want a decision to be made so they can start planning.
Yes.
Especially those rising ninth graders. They want to start planning.
And that means that if we get that feedback, get that information, by the meeting in March, we will be prepared to take a formal action, and people would be not satisfied, but at least know where to plan from that point in time. Have I missed anything, Katie? I hijacked Mac's meeting is what I did.
Fine, letting you hide.
And I can kind of circle back with Dr. Parker and Dr. Ingram and set some parameters and how let's all review it.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
You good?
That's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This time I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second, all in favor, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned.